Welcome back, Beyonders. I am your host, Justin. I am the only one solo today because we're recording at a funny time today, but we did it so that we could have our special guest come on the show today, Mr. Nils Hintze. Nils, welcome to the show. He is the author of the Vaesen RPG, horror RPG, and we are excited to have him here to talk about this RPG that has been taking tabletop RPG community by storm. So, Nils, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Now, Nils, you are located currently in Switzerland. Sorry, I lived in Switzerland for a little bit, in Sweden,
Yeah.
and you were in Sweden, and we had to do some finagling to make sure that we got the schedules right. But we're very happy that you are here with us and to talk about Vestin a little bit. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself? Where you are, what you're doing. Yeah.
Well, I'm in the southern Sweden, in a town called Malmö, and there are big preparations for Halloween in my household at the moment. Everything is decorated, and we're kind of trying out costumes for tomorrow and so forth. My kids are like crazy into Halloween, um, more than me actually. But other than that, I'm a psychologist working for the Red Cross in my kind
Oh,
of
cool.
daytime work, and I'm a freelance writer. So I've written mostly for the Free League, but I've written some other stuff as well. I would say I play a lot of RPGs. I'm not that into like board games and
Uh-huh.
figure games and so forth. It's just like RPGs. The
Cool.
whole
Yeah, yeah.
my whole geek nerd interest is focused on that. So I play a lot. Yeah.
That's awesome. Is has Halloween always been kind of a big deal there in Sweden? I know that when I was
No,
living in
no,
France
no,
and Switzerland, it was not at all.
no,
It was only until like maybe recently, within like the last 20 years, that it started getting bigger.
no, no. We have this like Swedish day or ritual, which was the only one that existed when I was a kid, and it's really like it's so quiet, and you go to the graves, and you kind of stand there in quiet something, and it's just dark, and so it's been like a big transformation, and then like everyone was kind of against this Halloween, this American stuff, but
Yeah,
now like the whole country has just adopted Halloween, so now it's just crazy big everywhere.
it's
Uh,
just a
But,
big
but
deal.
people don't seem to kind of get that it's a specific day. They tend to celebrate Halloween all week. So we have like kids every night here now, wanting candy. So it's just, come
That's funny.
on, it's just one day.
That's funny. I mean, like there are people here in the United States that would celebrate Halloween every day if they could. And I mean, we've got like Halloween parties and festivals and things like that that happen throughout the month of October. But yeah, you only get to go door to door one day of the week. You don't get to do that the whole
They
week.
take their chances of getting some chocolate. I mean, who wouldn't?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we are super excited to talk to you about your RPG that you wrote with Free League Press. And but before we get into that, let's talk about your Geek Week. How was your Geek Week this last week?
Well, I'm in an RPG campaign with the really old Marvel superheroes
Oh, okay.
RPG. Yeah, we have a group where we kind of try out really old games. So we play a version of it placed like in Stockholm in the 90s with kind of dark noir setting, and we're trying to be superheroes. So it's that's really exciting. We reached a kind of a point yesterday where we kind of met the boss, the
Yeah.
evil mastermind, and we were kind of like, what we're going to do with him? we can't really kill him because it's this game, and we can't really imprison him. So it was a big thing trying to kind of figure out what the characters would do.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. Is it an older RPG system that you're running, or is it just set
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
different, like an older time?
yeah. It's like I think it was published in '84 or something. It's really old.
Oh, interesting.
Uh,
I think I played that at Gen Con one time.
yeah, like
Was
a
it
box with a
the
map,
Champions?
and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and
Huh.
you can yeah.
That's
Just like
cool.
really thin rule books. So we tried out all like the old MERP and the first version of RuneQuest and so forth. So we're just kind of digging through all these old
Yeah.
games too. kind of find gems and yeah, that's
How
fun.
do you think? How do you think those old RPGs stack up to some of the newer ones today?
I think they're better than I expected. Often there are like parts of them that are really like, ooh, this mechanic has been forgotten or something. That's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
that's really great. And then there are some parts that are just like, hmm. You decide how to, I don't know, manipulate someone or charm someone, or there are no rules for, I don't know, this and that. And yeah, we tried the old Twilight 2000 as well, and I think that
okay.
was the first version was a really great game, but some parts of it are just bananas. They were like they didn't really kind of care that it should be simple. So we're like mathematical, like kind of things you need to go through to just sort out your stats. That were
Yeah,
crazy, but that was interesting.
yeah, very cool, very cool. Well, my friends and I, we are getting ready to have a little local gaming convention. It's in the basement of one of our co-hosts' house, Jason, and he's got a very large basement, so we can fit like 30 people in the basement to play games.
Ooh, cool. Yeah.
So it's just a fun little local thing that we do with our friends, and we've got a bunch of RPGs we're playing. We've got a bunch of board games we're playing. We've got food planned out.
Hmm.
It's going to be happening over about 3 days. So
Yeah.
it's
What games are you planning for? Or is it just pick up whatever when you get
no,
there?
no. We've got let me look real quick because I'm gonna forget them. But I know for some of the RPGs, like some people are running some D&D games. I think we've got, as far as RPG goes, we've got a couple instances of D&D, Star Wars,
Mm,
RPG, Star Trek. We have the Dune RPG that's going to be run.
mm.
I'm going to be running a Call of Cthulhu scenario, and I'm going to be running the Pendragon starter set
Okay.
game. So I'm
Cool.
excited about the Pendragon because I literally just cracked it open to start taking
Yeah.
a look at it. And I mean, who doesn't love like King Arthur stories, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think it's gonna be cool. Our friend Jason, he's gonna be running Hell Knight, which
Okay.
is a recent Kickstarter RPG that came out. It's a very rules light Zine style RPG, but it's you're literally bikers trying to put like the demons from hell that came out one night back to hell. So you're like a biker gang, like
That's a
trying
great
to,
great concept.
yeah. It's like it's like a total 80s like thrasher like
Hmm.
metal concept. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's gonna be wild. So we've got that. We've got a bunch of board games like Moonraker, Mosaic. We got some board games that we're gonna play. It's just a kind of a run the whole gamut. Whoever wants to play stuff. We also have space for people to just say like, hey, we've got a stack of games in the corner. Find a friend, grab one, play it. So.
Yeah.
But we have to kind of plan out the RPG so that you can prep for them, though. So we
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
we had some signups so that we knew like how many to expect and for each game and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun, and I think that we're gonna have a blast. So my Geek Week was done a lot of preparation to just kind of make sure, because again I'm running two
Can
RPGs,
imagine.
yeah, a bunch of stuff. So yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
fun though. It'll be a lot of fun.
We did something similar for a couple of years, but then we only used like RPGs that are just like pick up and play, no
Uh huh.
preparation, so we could have like people coming and going and stuff. But it was still a lot of preparation, still a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of why like I have a whole slew of starter sets on my shelf right now, and part of that is because like I can easily take a starter set, go through it a little bit and be like, okay, I
Yeah.
can run this game, and it's all there for you. Like if I were to try to homebrew like 3 RPGs in one weekend, that would just be too
No.
many, you know. So but this gives good flavor. Like I said, the Pendragon starter set will give like a really good flavor of that game, and I think that we'll all have a good time playing
Yeah.
Knights of the Round Table there. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it'll be a lot of fun. So, yeah, great. Well, I hope that you have a great Halloween. I hope that your Marvel campaign that you can eventually do something to the villain. You know.
Our last idea was to kind of join him, but as an afterthought, I don't know if that was a good heroic thing to do. So let's see what we'll do.
That's awesome. Yeah. If you can't beat him, you join him, right?
Yeah, be close to your enemy. We were thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. Okay, so I have here the Vaesen. Here, I want to pull it up. I have the Vaesen game that when did this game actually come out?
That's a good question. I'm gonna check. Feels like it came out, but 2020, I think. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's only 3 years old. Feels like a longer time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I imagine it felt longer for you because you were working on it, right?
Yeah.
But but so and I'm gonna state this for the record because at Gen Con nobody could pronounce this game correctly. So the correct pronunciation. Will you please tell us what the correct pronunciation of this game is?
It's Vaesen.
Vaesen. Okay.
Vaesen,
Yes.
yeah.
So
You
many people
actually
said
said it right when you tried before we started recording. No,
yes.
you also act like that.
That's good. I mean, that AE can really mess up, English, especially American speakers. We don't have too many instances of AE
No.
in our language, and so you had people saying Vaesen, all sorts of stuff. But Vaesen is the correct pronunciation, and that is how I will continue to say it. So now. Vaesen in Sweden is kind of like a subclass of supernatural creatures. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's like the old folklore creatures. So it's like, yeah, the creatures they were talking about, like in the 19th century or 18th or 17th century, in like small villages and scaring the kids with stories about the Vaesen. So they're kind of like, yeah, related to nature and like, yeah, those kind of creatures.
Like these are things like fairies and not necessarily like witches and vampires per se, but like you said, forest creatures, like maybe elves, I mean, leprechaun's probably like a British one,
Yeah,
but
but that is the cool stuff with it. I mean, there are different Vaesen all over the world. So different parts of the world will have their own Vaesen, and I mean that really says something, I believe, or I think so, about those parts of the world and how people were thinking and what kind of Vaesen they kind of had to invent to understand their reality and how they were thinking. So I think the Vaesens are like different. And I think
yeah.
just we had this mythic Britain and Ireland that came out as an expansion to Vaesen, and I think you can see that the creatures are kind of different actually. In the British version, they are more evil, I would say. They are like more bloodthirsty and more like more. I think the Swedish Vaesen, if you compare those two books, are more. Sad or more like tragic figures that kind of do evil but want something else but can't kind of, or like really like the pissed off over different things but not outright like vampire, I want to kill you and suck your blood,
Right.
evil.
Yeah, I think if you were to look at a North American version of Vaesen, you'd be looking at like Bigfoot's probably one, right? Like
Yeah.
a chupacabra, right? Which is like a little
A
animal
super
that
cobra.
a chupacabra. Yeah, it's like this.
I thought you said a super cobra. I thought it's
Oh,
like some gigantic worm. Sorry.
yeah,
Sorry,
no,
sorry.
a
Ignorance.
chupacabra, which is like a bloodsucker, is I think what that means, and it's like this little like kind of rabbit
Okay.
thing that that it anyway it sucks the blood of cattle basically, but it's like a mythical creature. I mean, there's like wendigos,
Yeah.
I mean, there's like all sorts of like kind of, and they're more like Native American style myths that kind of perpetuated through Spanish Spanish settlers, and then like eventually like the American frontier, like what you kind of heard on the frontier of those. So it's interesting because like you said, every country has its sort of its Vaesen, but we call it different names. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
folklore, and they're kind of like fantastical creatures without being your traditional D&D fantasy per
Yeah.
se.
Mm.
So, but
Yeah.
but like
What?
trolls and ogres and giants and like all those kind of fairy tales fall under that category too. It seems.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
And one thing that I would like to do, that there are no plans to do that, but that would be like kind of an expansion that takes place nowadays. Just try to kind of write a write a book about what kind of Vaesen would be like. Yeah, in our days. Yeah, what are we kind of talking about? Like back rooms and I don't know, that which we can kind of bring forth from the mirror.
Hmm.
Black Lady, or what you call? Uh,
Oh, Bloody Mary.
Bloody Mary, sorry, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
do
yeah,
do something about that would be really interesting to kind of
yeah.
collect uh,
Right,
Vaesen
right,
from
for sure.
nowadays.
Now you said that one of the things that and this was kind of in your intro that you wrote in this RPG is one of the things that really inspired you when you were about 10 years old was
I,
the Dragonbane. Was that you that wrote that? There was
no, it
a
wasn't actually.
okay.
It's Johan Egerkrans who's done the illustrations, but that's true
I
for me
see.
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
that's the same for me. I was heavily inspired by
yeah.
those
And so
games
we
and those
had,
images.
I don't know, I can't pronounce the original Swedish of the Demons and Dragons, right, game that had come out in the 1980s, and we had Thomas Herenstam on here
Yeah.
to talk about Dragonbane and some of that work that they had done and how he was heavily influenced by that when that came out. And so it's interesting because there's this blend, I think, that happens when we kind of touch on the mythical. Like we have this innate feeling, and you kind of mentioned it, where it's like it's interesting to see how our local myths and fantasy stories end up being kind of a reflection of who we are as a society.
Mm.
And and yet these, you as an example, as a tabletop RPG writer, you were influenced by these stories of myths, these stories of fantasy, and you decided to try to kind of bring that into like a game setting. um, what really so I guess my question for you is like like what was your thought process as you were kind of working through this on how to bring this to the table in a way that you were internalizing like those creatures.
Yeah. The first thing is of course that there is an art book with the same name that Johan Egerkrans has written and done the images or illustrations for. So when I came into this project, it was like decided that this art book should be this game. So I had to kind of solve how can that happen? How can we kind of make it into a game?
Hmm.
Um, and what I did was, of course, I tried to find like themes and that I wanted the game to be about. For instance, like the rural versus urban societies, and like the 19th century kind of um, break with the kind of old ways of living, and entering kind of the new modern industrialization, and with all the things that gained for society, but also all the costs. And you could say that the Vaesen are kind of a symbol for the old life, the more simple life, the more kind of that is, of course, not true. It wasn't a simple life, but you can have the idea that it was a more simpler life and that it was a
Sure.
kind of a life more close to nature and so forth. You can have those kind of ideas, even if they are not true in that sense. So that's what the kind of the conflict I was focusing on when constructing the games, and then the characters would be like people living in the new time because they are from the city going into the old time, or kind of in the parts of the country that is torn apart by these conflicts, like out in the villages where people are moving out and they're kind of abandoning the old kind of promises with the Vaesen, and they're not putting out the porridge to the fairies anymore, and
Yeah.
things are, and then the big mine from the industrial company is kind of breaking up the trolls caves, and everything is going bad. So I wanted to place the characters in the middle of that conflict, and we had kind of the time, because in Johan's pictures it was like 19th century unspecific.
Hmm.
I think it was thinking earlier 19th century, but we decided to place the game in unspecific mythic 19th century,
Hmm.
like a mythic in the north, as a way to kind of round. I mean, there are a lot of games with kind of heavy historical base, and I didn't think that this game would gain something from that, like having to read up on exactly how everything was, so it would become historically correct. So that was kind of a way
Right.
to get around that problem of just having like a version of the real world. Yeah, that was a long answer, but
No, it's great. It's great because I mean, there's two things that I picked up on there. One, because it wasn't so specific, you didn't need to get burdened down into the very specific details of the historical accuracy, which actually I think ends up becoming a burden on a lot of RPGs, especially a burden on the game masters, because they have to keep track of all these facts and things that happen, and maybe there's some large events that you need to keep in your RPG that ends up becoming like anchor point for storytelling.
mm,
Like maybe a certain king dies, or maybe a certain law was
mm,
passed that ended up changing the course of the way that people could interact with the Vaesen, or like because it expanded mining rights or something like that, right? And that was like a seminal date. And again, these are things that you could pick out from history or just make them up as anchor points for your storytelling. But by not focusing in saying like these were the exact times and dates, it allows a little bit more freedom to tell
yeah.
your stories the way you need to, right?
Yeah, and that was a big thing, that for everything I write, I want it to be like very accessible.
Hmm.
I think it can be extremely fun to play like I don't know, some kind of Lords of the Ring campaign where everyone needs to read up on exactly what river was there and how they were dressed and what
Hmm.
tobacco they were smoking. That could be really, really fun, but it's also taxing for the group.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of
especially
campaigns
the
are
GM,
never played. Was they?
especially the GM,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like it's really
yeah.
taxing to keep it all straight.
So I mean that is fun, but this game was intended to be kind of easy to prepare for and easy to play. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that I want to talk about, and we have mentioned this on our show actually quite a bit, is that some of the best storytelling that happens is when there are two civilizations that are clashing,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And so I've given this example before. Jerusalem during the Crusades, where you had the Muslim civilization and the Christian civilization, really just clashing right there, and there's a lot of change that happens. Or you could say Britain during the Viking invasions is a great example, of
Yeah.
two civilizations really clashing there, and
Mm,
it opens up a lot of intrigue and provides a really good backdrop for
yeah.
RPGs and stories. And so the choice of kind of the old world meets the, and I'm putting this in quotations here, the progressive world, right, of the Industrial Revolution and technology kind of clashing together. Where you have the old ways and the new ways, or you have the tradition versus progression. You have those just all kind of mixing it up. I think allows for some interesting. It provides a great backdrop for
Yeah.
this. And one of them is in the intro that you had in here. It talks about how the Vaesen are not responding the way that they traditionally had, right? Like things have changed. And
Yeah.
so, and it's up to the characters to sort of respond to it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a kind of a really great storytelling aspect, and
Yeah.
I think the
Find kind of the conflict, or kind
Mhm.
of where, as you say, two things kind of collide, and that kind of place in the middle of it. That is very interesting. I agree. Absolutely.
And you're kind of asking your characters to sort of be of two worlds here
Yeah.
in this RPG, right? They're a lot of the kind of the character archetypes that you have live in society, and they're members of society, but they have been touched in a way that they can see the Vaesen, and so that kind of sets them apart to where now they need to sort of go back to the old ways and understand how to work with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the questions I had, so this book that you have, the original RPG here, is centered in Uppsala, Sweden.
Yeah.
Now, what is the significance of it being centered in Uppsala versus another city?
I think Uppsala is very much university city. It's kind of a
Mhm.
we have Linné, who came from there, who were kind of creating this system for all flowers and kind of deciding how to kind of organize them. Which is, at least in Sweden, is a symbol for kind of, he did all these travels out in the wild and kind of came back with all these flowers and grass and observations, and kind of organized the world. And we had some plans of placing it in Gothenburg instead. And Gothenburg during this time was kind of a real wild city. It was like full of scoundrels and bandits, and kind of it had a harbor which was connected to the entire world, and there was like a really rough place to live. But we decided on kind of the more quiet, librarian city of Uppsala
Yeah.
instead, with kind of more dry, more kind of slow and peaceful place. I mean, there can happen things there as well, but that we thought that would be a better backdrop both for the game and for those adventures out into the wild. Just come from the kind of more academic place.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting feel that I got while reading through this book, is that it kind of has a sort of an academic feel. Maybe like maybe sort of a and I'm not going to compare this directly because I don't think it compares one to one, but a Call of Cthulhu esque feel where there's
Mm.
sort of an investigation. There's a mystery that is happening that you need to kind of get to the bottom of, and usually at the end there's a Vaesen involved, or something that you have to figure out how to deal with, right? And so um, I think that there is sort of that academic aspect of like, okay, well, let's scientifically get to
Mm.
the bottom of this, and then unscientifically deal with it.
Yeah, blow it to pieces. Yeah, yeah, but of course, I mean, I've played Call of Cthulhu my entire life, and I love that game.
Mhm.
So it would be strange if it wasn't influenced by it. And as you say, there are many similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though that we discussed with the historical correctness is like actually a big difference between the games.
Now, Uppsala is kind of a little far north, right? I mean, it is not.
Yeah,
It's not down near the coast on Sweden, and
no,
I imagine that like in the 1800s, it was sort of a town where it was it was a university city, like you said, but not far out from it was the wilds of Switzerland, or I keep saying Switzerland. I'm so sorry,
No
of
problem.
Sweden. The wilds of Sweden, right? Like where you had little villages, and
Yeah,
again, the old ways were very manifest out there, where
yeah, yeah.
you
Yeah,
had
you
the
could say it's kind of like a. I'm being a bit unfair to the north of Sweden when I say this, probably, but you could say that it's a kind of a gate to the gigantic north and more
yeah.
wild Sweden, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so there again is another sort of, you've placed the center of the story where you've got like and then, again, this is probably not fair, but the idea of like the civilized city versus
Yeah.
the uncivilized, and rural um area, and that I think feels a little bit more authentic than if you were to place this in Oslo, for example. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like
Yeah. But
that.
that
So,
was definitely our thoughts with the
yeah.
yeah.
So now it says here, that this is an horror RPG. What makes Vaesen a horror RPG in your mind?
That's a good question. Because I would say it's I mean it's not a slasher game.
Yes.
It's not a game you will get nightmares from, I think. Probably not. So it's more on the cozy side of horror.
Mhm.
Uh, but still think it is a horror game. But I mean, it's a kind of more creepy, mysterious fog, things happening, being exposed to strange magic. So it's more that kind of game, and of course the mystery. So yeah, you could call it a mystery game instead if you wanted to, but I think it's somewhere there, mystery horror game,
Yeah.
and it's not about. I think many other games are about more achievements, kind of winning fights or
Hmm.
I don't know, riding motorbikes, I don't know, whatever. But this is more of like kind of solving the puzzle and
Hmm.
finding out stuff and preventing a catastrophe and so forth. And I would say that also, yeah, it's something many horror games have in common. The experience is more important than the achievements.
Yeah, the thing that struck me about this, right? I think there, in my opinion, there was two things that stood out that made this kind of a horror game. The first one is, again, its similarity with Call of Cthulhu in the sense that you're the people that are, you know your characters that you have, they have been touched in a way that they can see things that are hidden, right? They've got
Yeah,
that second sight type of thing, but they're generally just regular people. I mean, like your character archetypes that you had was like a cook, a servant,
yeah,
like, I mean, like these are people that are not like, your superheroes that go out. So they're having to deal with these kind of big issues, um, while not being like equipped with anything terribly special, you
yeah.
know.
And then you can also add like the Vasans aren't like they aren't you can't really fight them
Mhm.
because they for starters they will probably just kill you because they're so much better at doing it. They're like
Right.
really dangerous and most of them won't even die by being shot at. So you're yeah, I agree, you're really exposed both from not having any superpowers and the enemy or the Vasan having them.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. And you almost feel this certain duty that, like, if I don't take care of this, it can cause a catastrophe somehow, right? And
yeah,
so there's
yeah.
that pressure that you have upon yourself as a normal person that's going to deal with it.
Mm.
The second part that I feel like makes it a horror thing is that I think I'm getting. Did you ever watch the show Supernatural?
Uh, I will. I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the one
Tell
with
me, is
like
that the
the
one with the kind of Superman-ish powers, or which one is that?
no, so Supernatural are like the two brothers that are like monster hunters.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
watched that. Yeah.
Yeah, Sam and Dean Winchester, right?
Yeah,
Like they
yeah.
go out and it's just kind of like they go out and they come across something that seems a little weird and they end up getting to the bottom of it and who knows? It could be a werewolf, it could be a vampire, it could be a
Mm,
ghost, it could be just different things, but they had been trained from the time that they're little kids to deal with these supernatural ways. Like they had their shotguns full of salt, they had
mm,
their, like their different things that they could deal with the supernatural, right? And so to me, it's got a little bit of a supernatural vibe in the sense of maybe you're not actual like monster hunters out there, but you
mm,
have been bestowed with knowledge. You are learning knowledge of
mm.
how to deal with the supernatural in their own way, right? Like in their like to deal with a ghost, you have to do it a certain way. To deal with maybe to deal with like you in the book you had a brook horse or
Yeah,
or a mare or something like that. Like they need to be dealt with in their ways to get rid of them,
yeah,
rather than just like a bullet or a sword or something like that. That just
mm,
won't work.
yeah,
So I definitely got that vibe when I'm
yeah,
reading. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Where you needed to leverage the supernatural um, to do the supernatural.
yeah, yeah. And I think as you're saying as well that the village which which you come to, the villagers are, as you say, also exposed, and I think that could also be a horror element. We've played some scenarios where we come to places which were really a lot of poverty and a lot of kind of, you can use those theme in this game as well. More kind of mundane, real horror as well, and that will kind of add to the feeling of seriousness. So that is kind of a balance. You can play it lightly or with a more heavy feel,
Yeah.
um, depending on how you depict kind of what kind of world is this. Do you use like the real horrors that actually happen, or do you go with a more fantasy style villagers who are kind of happy and well fed?
Well, it depends on which fairy tales you're reading, right? Are you reading
Yeah,
the Hans Christian Andersen ones, or you're reading the
yeah,
Grimm
yeah,
brothers? You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Actually, yeah,
so because the Grimm brothers, like that's some pretty heavy stuff.
yeah, yeah. And
Like
I think those tales really match this game well. I think that is.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So, all right, so let's talk about the system here. You when you decided to write this, did you know that you were going to be working with Free League, and did that
Yeah,
influence the type of system that you wanted to use in creating this?
yeah, definitely. They were actually giving me the job to do it, and in that job description, it was said that it should be like a year zero engine game.
Uh huh.
So that was like part of it from the start. But then I had to kind of tweak that system and find how can that system work with this world and these stories, kind of inventing a magic system and so forth.
Yeah. Um, so the year zero system uses D6s primarily, right, as their way to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you will take a skill and your attribute and you'll combine that together to form your dice pool of D6s. And then you roll it, and 1/6 is a success. And, if you get multiples,
Mm.
um, that allows you to get greater successes and things like that. So, how do you feel that works for you, like this RPG style? Like, in terms of like, does the mechanics really help drive the story? Do you think that the story helps reinforce the mechanics, or vice versa?
Um, I think it works good. I would say
Okay.
that's not a good answer. um, I think the whole push mechanic works well for many games. I think that was one of the great things with a year zero engine, that you have like the push mechanic where you can re-roll with the costs. And in this game, you kind of um, you get tired or wounded or kind of um, get conditions that kind of makes it harder. Um, I think that creates kind of this question: will I go on? Will we push on? Or do we need to kind of step back and take a break? And I think that does many things mechanically. And one of the things it does that I really like and really want to have in my games is um, that you need to play out scenes which isn't about chasing someone or killing someone or running away from something, but that are about the characters and them interacting, because that is how you kind of heal these conditions. So it's a system. The system is kind of you move forward, you take cost, and then you go back and you kind of heal by having social interactions, and then you push on and then you back away. And so that's this back and forth which gives a story with different kind of scenes where you get to know the characters, and when you get like a dramatic curve of kind of intensity and more slow scenes. And so that was one of the points with that kind of system for pushing roles.
Yeah, and I've played Alien, and I have played the One Ring.
Yeah,
I've yet to play Vaesen because I need to. I'm probably going to be the guy that runs it, right? And
yeah,
so I haven't been a player for it. But what I do like about the Year Zero system is that I think it's an interesting hybrid between your normal numbered face dices and like the or die and the like the Star Wars RPG dice, because those ones are what they call narrative dice. You know, and
yeah,
you get a certain amount of successes, or you get a success in the threat, and that changes a little bit about what happens and what you're trying to do. You know,
yeah,
like maybe you don't succeed at hitting the guy, but because you got so many advantages or something like that, they end up dropping their weapon, right?
mm,
Which can
mm,
give you an advantage. And I feel like with the way that this works, where again, you can push a roll if you need to, like if you get a really bad roll, but if you get a whole bunch of successes, it can help change the narrative a little bit, and you may gain a certain advantage, or you know,
yeah.
maybe you just fail miserably and it's really bad for everybody, you know. And so, and so I like it because I think it helps drive the story. And I really like what you said about that. This is not a game about achievements, right? It's not about how many monsters did you kill for experience.
No,
It's not about, you know, how many bike rides, I guess you said, motorcycle rides or something like that, you know, for experience. It's about playing through the story, right? And that role playing as you go along.
yeah.
So, which I think is great. But tell me how does like how do you level up? How do you get better as a character if you're playing multiple sessions together?
Well, you get experience points as in
Mhm.
most other games. You get them by answering questions at the end of the session, like, yeah, just participating gives you one. And did you confront the Vaesen? Did you take risks for other people? Have you learned anything?
Mhm.
Did you perform any extraordinary action? So you
Mhm.
kind of get experience points, and then you can buy either skill points or talents, which are kind of edges you have, like things you're really good at. You can get some mechanical um, benefit from.
Yeah, and what one thing I've noticed here is that you don't have any hit points
No, no, you
as
don't.
part of this. So how does that work then? Like if you and find yourself facing down a Vaesen, you
Yeah.
don't you know, you're not trying to grind down their hit points, and you don't have hit points that you're being taken down. So how does that work?
You grind down your conditions, and then you can get broken. You can get broken both physically and mentally. So mentally is, of course, and then you get a critical injury that you roll on the table, and those can be like kind of okay. You're like confused or exhausted, but it can also be like that you could die directly, or you can get like burst artery or yeah, really bad conditions,
Yeah.
mental conditions as well. So that's the way you die, not from really from the mental conditions, but from the physical critical injuries.
Yeah. Very cool. Um, yeah, I kind of like that. Again, it's not about you know, staying in these prolonged fights in a sense of like, oh, now I take a healing potion in the middle of combat. I'm gonna stop
Yeah,
what I'm doing, hitting you with a sword, to drink from this bottle. You know,
yeah,
it's really about again hitting those different levels narratively, and then getting those injuries that'll take you out of the fight.
yeah.
So
And it's the same for the Vaesen. They have like a list of conditions that things will happen to them, and they can be like they get extra dice because they get angry when you shoot at them. But it can also be like trying to get out of there, moving into the forest or whatever. So there are like specific conditions for each Vaesen.
so
Um,
let me pull up a Vaesen that I was looking at earlier, which was this was one of my favorites actually, which was the Church Grim was one of my
yeah,
favorite Vaesen that I have. And the thing that I loved about the Church Grim is that it actually keeps watch over the church, right?
yeah,
And it was created from an animal dying and being taken inside of the church, right? And so it will attack anyone that either harms the church or the pastor or tries to steal from the church. So like this is a you can't call this an evil creature, right?
no,
It
no,
it it's a supernatural creature, but it is not an evil one. Can it do harm? Absolutely, right? But it is there as a protective manner.
yeah,
So I think it's very interesting. But right here, and for those that are looking at our screen on YouTube, you can see right here are the conditions that happen. So when you're running this, when it takes damage, you'll just tick off the conditions like on the way down. So its first one becomes angered, right, which is a condition that it or I guess it becomes like an attribute that it sort of has.
yeah. I
Then
think that's just role playing. It just
yeah,
role played angry. So
yeah,
it's just no mechanical.
okay. And then it becomes mad, and then becomes dazed, and then wounded and cautious, right? And then furious, and it becomes broken and dissolves away.
Mm,
If you do that, so it's interesting because like everyone has a unique condition list as it goes down,
yeah,
which I think drives it to play a different way. What if I compare this to Alien, for example, um, they don't have like a roll to attack that they do, right? They'll just roll on a table, a d6 table,
mm,
and it'll say what happens, right? They might attack with their tail, or they
yeah,
might attack with their mouth, or they might just look very menacing and cause fear, or something
mm,
like that. But this one, as the action goes down, like as it kind of goes down the list, like it'll start to do different things that are probably within its sort of character, right? Like if it gets threatened, it'll act a certain way for one creature, but a different way for another one, and etc. So I've
yeah.
really liked that about the Vaesen there. Yeah, great. So one of the things that I think sets this RPG apart from a lot of other systems, and this is something that people clamor for all the time, and I don't know that it's implemented very well in a lot of different things. Usually because it's sort of homebrewed, and it's this idea of a sanctuary or a headquarters or a bastion or stronghold that you can have. And I mean, this
Mm,
was clamored for so much in D&D that Matthew Colville made his own strongholds and
mm,
supplement that he did on Kickstarter that was like a huge book that people could use in their campaigns if they want. But with Vaesen, this is built innately in it, right?
yeah, yeah.
So why don't you walk us through kind of like what the idea of the headquarters was? Like, what was your thought process behind it when you created it, and like how is it used in the game?
Well, in the game, if we start with that, the characters are all part of something called the Society, which is
Mhm.
it's a group that they're not out to kill all Vaesen. They're kind of out to, they all have the sight, and they're out to kind of make things good primarily for humans, but also for Vaesen. They're kind of like watching out for the supernatural and what happens. And they're based in Uppsala, if you play in the Mythic North. And there have been like a society for a long time, but it kind of disappeared, and now the start of the first campaign is the player characters kind of reopening the old castle which was used by the society, and kind of discovering this big castle with all the rooms and stuff, and so as you play you will kind of get other kinds of experience points, and uh, build this castle, and kind of find new rooms, and get new contacts in the city which lets you do things. You kind of build or explore, or how you say it, this castle during the campaign.
Mhm.
That is, of course, yeah, I mean, you could just play out that you just walk around and find all rooms, but mechanically it doesn't work like that. Mechanically,
Yeah.
you kind of find the old temple in the basement, and wow, we had this new thing, and we can do stuff with that, and yeah. So, and you can also, bad things can also happen inside this castle, or as a part of it. So that, which could lead to kind of small scenarios between the main scenarios, where you have to, deal with something that's haunting the castle, or
Mm.
some journalist trying to find out what you're doing inside those walls and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
I think that was one of the things that really caught my eye as I was going through. And I mean, the great thing is the first part of this RPG does a great job of laying out what this whole thing is within like the first 2 or 3 pages. And then you can kind of dig into all the different sections. So it's a very easy RPG to read in terms of rules. And I commend you on your writing for it, and and the layout and the organization. I think it was really great. But the idea of this castle as your headquarters just seems really cool. There's some really great like abilities that you can get from unlocking different rooms, and
yeah,
really just kind of gives you some advantages in what you're doing.
and it's kind of, it's a little bit computer gamesy. We
Uh-huh.
kind of, you can see that a tree, kind of a decision tree in front of you, kind of going down. We buy this first, and that then, and so forth. So I think there was some inspiration from that more, yeah, computer
Yeah.
game way of doing things.
What does a typical Vaesen campaign look like? Is it like I mean, obviously, like you can run a session in like 3 or 4 hours. You could have a multiple
Mm.
session arc if you want to. But like, when you were writing this game, were you thinking like, hey, like somebody may be playing this like 2 times a month for a year type of thing, and really get like everything that they would hope for out of this? Or like, did you have that in mind when you wrote it, or what did you think?
Yeah, well, that was also one thing that the Fruit League were really, they were really clear with. It should be like a Monster of the Week game.
Hmm.
So I think the typical campaign is just going out and doing different scenarios, and then the kind of thing that continues is your base and the characters, and then there are different Vaesen who are not connected or related to each other. But when I play it myself, I tend to lean in more towards actually having a like a meta story, letting things be connected, and even if you
Uh-huh.
go to different parts of the Mythic North, the players and the characters will soon find out that it's all connected, and perhaps even to their own
Yeah.
pasts and their own relatives and stuff. So that's the way I like to play it. But I think many people play it more like a series of monster of the week's scenarios, and that works great, of course.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It seems like there's always room for, something to happen, especially if you've got a base and you can just kind of go out, right? It's not like you're on a Lord of the Rings journey to Mordor.
No,
you
no,
know,
no.
that plays out very differently. You
Yeah.
know.
And I mean, I think that's a good thing with us as well, with the Monster of the Week thing, because you can have like one player won't show this week and you can still play.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that much if we remember we haven't played for 4 months and we can't remember what happened last time. Doesn't matter because we're going to a new city and a new
Yeah.
village and doing something else. So I think it's an upside and downside with that, of course. But
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I wanted to share here is if you go to the Free League website, I mean, there's a lot of Vaesen products on here, right? A lot of really good stuff that we have, and all the quality things that we have come to know and love from Free League. We talked about the pre-ordering the Lost Mountain Saga
yeah.
here that is coming out. Now, where does this Lost Mountain Saga do? I think you said that you weren't as involved with this one as writing the original one.
No, I haven't been involved at all in that actually. So
Okay,
that
cool.
is Eleanor's child, or I should say. So it's from the podcast with the same name.
Okay,
So they
cool.
played through it, and she has written it, and then it became like a campaign. Yeah,
Oh,
it's really cool.
that's very cool. Yeah, I mean, you can see here, right? There's 5 chapters of this. This is basically a story campaign. This doesn't fit the Monster of the Week that we're talking about, right? This is actually like a story campaign that moves along. So
Yeah, yeah,
um, it looks very cool. And again, like all the art like fits in, and it just is very
yeah,
very neat. And there was the right down here, the I guess it's the VTT stuff, but that's an RPG Mythic in Britain, Ireland,
mm,
um, that had come out earlier this year. I think maybe late last year.
yeah,
But this one won the gold Ennie at Gen Con this year for best RPG. So this is a great opportunity to check this out. And I wonder, like for our listeners, we get a lot in obviously here in the United States, Canada, and the UK. We get some from Sweden, and we get some from other parts of the world. I know Vaesen is very much a Nordic focused RPG, but I wonder if some of the stories in this Mythic Britain and Ireland may resonate a little bit more with the native English speakers, just because I
yeah.
I kind of grew up learning about leprechauns and things like that because I was
Yeah.
that's just part of our culture here in the United States as well. You know.
And also I think it's more closer related to kind of the what you see in movies and TV series, and kind of the common uh, image you have of supernatural creatures. And so you
Right.
I think it's easier for almost anyone who watches like popular movies to get into these kind of creatures. Some of them, at least.
Yeah.
Some of them are more obscure. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting because I remember playing The Witcher, video games and reading the books, right? And those are all Eastern European
Hmm.
fantastical creatures. And again, there's sort of like echoes of similarities with the ones that I had grown up with.
Hmm.
But there's some that are very different as well. And I got that same feeling from, your original Vaesen RPG. It's like, again, there's like echoes of similarities here, but they're different just because, I mean, stories are
Yeah.
stories that span generations and cultures. But, when they've been sort of isolated by language or even physical barriers like oceans and mountain
Yeah.
ranges and things like that, they tend to change a little bit and change to the environment around them. So I think
Yeah, and
that's
I would like to recommend there is a Ukraine. I mean, there are a lot of stuff that people have written that are not published by the Free League, but that are published on the um, I can't recall what it's called, but you can publish things for these
is it the
games.
drive through RPG?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
And there is this Ukraine text about Ukraine Vaesen that is yeah, it's really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and there's also a Japanese like Vaesen
Oh,
Japanese version which is also really cool. Um, And the Free League has a kind of a program for like publishing things to their
Mhm.
games. Yeah, the
Yeah, they've
name
got
of it.
their free league kind of workshop, right? That they
Yeah,
call or
exactly,
something.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So if you are interested in getting into Vaesen, I mean, go to the Free League website. There's plenty here. Here's what I would recommend as well. These books are almost art books into themselves, right? Like they just have the most amazing illustration, and again, a Free League product is a very quality product. The great thing is if you buy it from their store, you can get a PDF copy of it as well. So maybe that's the one that you turn the pages a lot and you leave the other one on the shelf for the artistic purposes. But I mean, I like having the physical copy and the PDF as well. But if you're interested in all of that, like it's all here at the store, you should check it out. And Niels, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it, and I'm so glad that you brought this to life for us because this is a really cool system. It's a really cool RPG. The artwork is amazing, and I think it's inspiring in itself. And for you to kind of just bring all of this together, some of your childhood stories and all the stuff that was out there, just to bring it to the game table, we really appreciate. And I'm looking forward to running it and playing it, hopefully with my friends.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks for having me. It's a great honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great. Again, everybody, if you we'd love to hear from you what you think about this. Please leave a comment. Let us know. Have you played Vaesen? What's your experience with it? And feel free to let us know if there's some things that we should be aware of out there that may help us run these games in the future. So we thank you all for listening. We thank you all for being here with us. And everybody, we'll see you at the tables and have a good night.